Good evening. Welcome to Expat Insights. I'm your host, Raju Mandhyan. Here at Expat Insights, we take external views of the internal successes by foreigners, expats, and immigrants who have made the Philippines their home. And some days we get really, really lucky when a passing by guru, a foreigner, passes by the Philippines and shares his wisdom with us. Tonight, we are very, very honored to have Dr. William Rothwell, professor at Penn State University, who comes to the Philippines very often, and I happened to catch him in mid-flight. So we have Dr. Rothwell as our guest and his friend and disciple, Maribel Aglipay from the Philippine Society for Training and Development, and we are going to talk about what the CEO expects from corporate training, and Dr. Rothwell will define that for us. Dr. Rothwell and Maribel, welcome to Expat Insights.
Thank you for inviting us here.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. This is going to be a fun show with you two.
Wonderful.
Good. Okay. So before we start, go to the subject matter of what the CEO of a company expects from training, from corporate training. Let's hear a bit about yourself. Ladies first.
Well, I'm an independent consultant. I've been an independent consultant for about 14 years. My practice has been around training, but more now...
0 years?
Beg your pardon?
You said 40 years?
No, I said 14 as a consultant.
Okay.
But in the work world, I've been a part of the work world for 32 years. And my practice started with training, and now I'm moving more into workplace learning and performance.
And then Dr. Rothwell will define what the difference is between workplace learning and training. Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Rothwell is an author of 79 books, and he's still counting. So if he comes back here next year, he might probably hit 89. Okay. So Dr. Rothwell, tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I entered the field that we formerly called training in 1979, and I'm currently a professor at Penn State University in the U.S., and there I head up a graduate program in training and development and organization development, and I've been there for 21 years. Prior to that, I was an HR professional working in the insurance industry and then in the government, both in training and development roles. So I'm one of the rare people in the academic community who had 20 years of work experience in the field before I became a professor.
The subject matter, Dr. Rothwell, of training and development and organizational development, in layman's terms, and for the person on the street, what does that mean? Well, is it education? Is it high school? Is it college? Is it, what is it?
A frequent question is, what's the difference between education and training?
Right, sir.
In fact, one time I was invited to testify in front of a legislative body when I was working in the government, and the question was, why does the agency need training when most of the people you hire are college graduates?
Right.
So the assumption being that college trains you. Well, no, it doesn't. College gives you very broad knowledge, but the professors have no idea in what setting or context or corporate culture in which you're going to be asked to apply that knowledge, and sometimes that makes a big difference. For example, I was a training director in an agency that did audits of government entities, and we hired accounting majors from the universities. Unfortunately, none of them had had government accounting, which is quite different from traditional private sector accounting. So consequently, we had to do quite a bit of internal training on fund accounting in order to teach people with college degrees a completely different view of the accounting field. So training is like a laser beam. It's very focused on helping people become qualified for their jobs, stay qualified for their jobs, and prepare for advancement into more responsible positions within the context of a specific company culture.
Or a profession or job.
Or profession.
So thus specialized knowledge.
Yes.
Relevant to the job, to the industry. Not
Yeah.
just knowledge, but knowledge, skills, and the attitude towards that
Right.
job or that function.
So you need both. Education gives you the basics. Training makes it very specific to a particular job, a particular company, a particular management value system and belief system.
Clear. So now the subject matter tonight is, what does a company head or CEO expect from this specialized training that is given to people who come and work for an organization? That's our subject matter. Before we go there, I know that you have been to the Philippines a couple of times. Not a couple of times, several times, and you have a love affair going on with this country.
Yes,
And with
correct.
a woman from this country, a
That's-
Filipina.
that's
So
correct.
tell me, how is it? How
Well,
good is it?
I've been married to a Filipina lady for 31 years.
Yeah.
Although we met in the U.S. In fact, I'm one of those few people whose mother actually introduced him to his wife-to-be.
Okay.
Which is very
Good old days,
unusual in the
matchmaking
US.
happens. Yeah.
The way that happened was that my wife came on a work visa as a nurse,
Right.
and my mother worked as a nurse's aide in a nursing home where my wife-to-be also worked. And I was coming home for the weekend from the university to visit, and my mother pulled my picture out of her purse and showed it to my wife-to-be, and she said, "Here is my son. He is a student forever. He's been at the university, but he also has a well-paying job with the government."
That sold you.
And my wife-to-be looked at the picture, and she said, "I must meet him."
All right, I like the guy. And now you are happily settled in the state of Pennsylvania.
That's correct.
With her and kids with her.
Well, we've had 2 children, and we're what you call empty nesters now. Both children are grown and gone, so it
Yeah.
is now just the 2 of us and our beloved cat.
So how much of the Filipino knowledge, skills, and attitude or culture has rubbed off on you, Dr. Rothwell? in the
Well,
last
a
31
little bit, but I spend a lot of time in Asia, not just the Philippines. In fact, I've been to China more than I have been to the Philippines. I've been there 63
So you don't
times.
have a Chinese person at home
That's correct.
in the same room.
That's correct.
Okay, let's go to what the CEO expects from corporate training. Yeah? What does he expect? What does the head of a company want and hopefully get from corporate training, Dr. Rothwell?
Well, maybe it would help if I gave a little background to that question.
Yes, sir.
The book I published with that title, What CEOs Expect from Corporate Training, came about because I've been very active with the American Society for Training and Development over the years and been involved with their competency studies. A competency study is like an occupational study. It describes the ideal person in a field. Professors care
All
about...
the levels of his knowledge, skills, and
Exactly.
aptitude or attitude towards that function. No? That's a
Correct.
competency, yeah.
And it's research-based. We
Yeah.
study thousands of people in many nations.
Right.
And I've been active with ASTD in doing that research for many years. But one of the things we typically do is, or haven't done, is look at groups outside our own field. So what that means is we study successful practitioners in the training and development field, but we don't ask others what they believe is needed for success. So I felt that one of the groups that's quite important
It's like a shoemaker studying shoemaking, but not studying the person who wears the shoes.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So I felt that it was necessary to do some research around what an important customer, not the only customer, but an important customer of the training field wants, which is the CEO.
Right.
And there are parallels to that from some other occupations. For example, the human resource field has also studied the very same thing. So I took the research methodology, and we went out and interviewed 78 CEOs about their opinions about what they expected of the training and development function.
And what was the discovery?
And we used as a base the research we had done among successful trainers as a point of comparison. We wanted to compare what the practitioners felt was necessary for success in the field, and compare that to what CEOs...
People who were impacted.
Exactly.
Or people who have to pay for it.
People who have to pay for it, exactly. And what we found was actually rather depressing for people in the training field. Over the years, we have developed a more and more ambitious view of what the training and development practitioner should do, what results they should obtain in organizations. But what we heard from CEOs was a very disturbing message from our standpoint.
Of all the things in the book, of all the 78 interviews, what were the top 5 things, Dr. Rothwell?
Well, one thing is, in the training field, we believe that it's important not to give training on everything, but to be very selective, to focus it through what we call a needs assessment, and to focus on only what people need to know to do their jobs. Well, when we asked CEOs about that, they said that they questioned whether that was something that our field should really be doing, because we were making work for ourselves and justifying our own existence.
So that was the one thing that CEOs did not want, rather than wanted. So they did not want you to just come up with solutions, training-based solutions.
No, they weren't saying that. They were saying that they questioned whether we were the right people, we the trainers, are the right people to determine what people need to be successful on their jobs. So they were even questioning whether we have the objectivity to provide a realistic frame of reference for that.
So that was one thing.
That was one thing. Another thing that they question, very frequent in training sessions, you've attended those, you probably know that at the end of most training courses you are given an evaluation sheet to fill out. And one of our questions was about the role of the trainer in conducting evaluations of training. And we were somewhat surprised and dismayed to hear that CEOs questioned whether we should be the ones conducting those participant evaluations, simply because they felt that it's very much akin to an accountant auditing their own books, that there was a question of could we conceal, for example, evaluations that were negative about the training sessions received. We just lose some of the surveys that were conducted, and only things that would be presented would be positive views of the training received.
Doc, 2 things. So those are 2 things, right? So the second one, let me understand it. It means that if I, as a trainer, as a teacher or an educator, again, those are 3 different things, no? If I influence my own evaluation, it's like I'm appraising my own work.
Exactly.
That we did not want. That the CEO did not want. Let's take a break at this point, Ate Maribel, and then we'll come back and ask your opinion about these 2 situations here, about what the CEO wants. So stay with us. We are with Dr. Rothwell. This is Expat Insights. I'm your host, Raju Mandhyan. We'll just come back after the break. Good evening. Welcome back to Expat Insights, and we are with Dr. Rothwell and also Dr. Aglipay, or almost soon to be Dr. Aglipay, and we are talking about the value of corporate training as perceived by CEOs and business owners. You know? So Dr. Rothwell gave us 2 points about what the CEOs do not want from, so the expectations are opposite of that. Your perspective on that, Dr. Aglipay, Maribel, Ate Maribel, to me.
Well, it's expected that in our practice we do training needs analysis and evaluation, which are the 2 things that Dr. Rothwell mentioned. Unfortunately, in the last 2 studies that the Philippine Society for Training and Development conducted, which was like in 2004 and 2008, only a number of the respondents actually conducted formal needs analysis. and evaluation.
You mean corporations or trainers?
Yes.
Or the training people in charge of training?
Yes, the people in charge of training.
Only how many %?
A really small percentage.
Did the TNA. TNA's training needs. So that means whatever they were putting out, they didn't know if that was needed. They were putting it out because it was there. Training.
They probably were just running it because they have a feel for it. They think that that's what the organization needs. So, so we feel that maybe some of the things that they're doing might not be all that relevant too, unless you show that this is really what the target audience needs.
Yeah.
And sadly, also, when in terms of evaluation, only the happy sheets or the feedback sheets are being administered. They don't go as far as learning evaluation or on-the-job behavior.
Beyond level 1, they don't go, no? So, from the point of view of my viewer, training needs analysis is what? What is a metaphor for training needs analysis from any other field? When I say training needs analysis, how does a CEO or a training head find out what does a group of people need? How do they go about that? What's the diagnosis procedure, Dr. Rothwell?
Well, we teach a whole graduate course in that,
yes,
but
sir.
we treat it as a project in its own right, and we focus on, like a laser beam, exactly what you need to know.
Right.
Who is attending the training, what they need to know to get the job results that the company expects, and where they will be applying that knowledge, skill, and attitude.
Right.
So we have to systematically study 3 things: who, what, and where.
Right.
And so that is typically expected in our field. That's what most of the practitioners believe, but the CEO expectations said that they questioned whether the trainers were the best ones to be doing that. They felt maybe the managers should do that, or an external consultant. They were questioning the fact that trainers essentially are justifying their own existence by doing training needs assessment, which is a perspective that I don't think anyone in the training field has even thought about.
But so I heard you create a metaphor yesterday or day before. I was in your workshop, and you said, you mentioned the doctor. Somebody walks into a doctor's office and says, "Doctor, I have a stomach ache." So would you explain the relationship or the parallel between what a doctor does and a trainer has to do in terms of TNA?
Excellent question. And a trainer needs to approach a training need the same way a medical doctor approaches a diagnosing an illness. A patient walks in and says something like, "I have a stomach ache." The doctor doesn't just jump to the conclusion that the person needs an antacid. The doctor, if the doctor does that, it's defined as malpractice. The doctor has to find out why the person has a stomach ache and narrow it down to one or several root causes, and then prescribe the right kind of medicine. The problem is that even in MBA schools, those managers who are professionally trained have never received those diagnostic skills to analyze the root causes of human productivity problems. And that's what our field studies. So we know, for example, there are about 650 factorial root causes of why people don't do their jobs.
Why people are not productive, or they don't create value in a
And
in
so
a setup.
training will only solve about 10% of organizational problems. The other 90% of problems require some other kind of solution.
Structural, systemic.
Yeah, we might change their job description, the boss they report to, the kind of feedback they receive, the rewards they're getting from the work they do. We might analyze the person themselves to see if they have disabilities that prevent them from doing the job. But because managers have not been trained on this, they often jump to the conclusion that training is the solution to every problem. That's the snake oil medicine view of training. It cures everything, and it doesn't.
Sometimes it could be systems outside of the individual. No? So that's 2 things, Dr. Rothwell. The first thing is the CEO expects that the trainer What was the first thing? Sorry. The second one was the trainer do not do the TNA and do not do the
First, they don't
evaluation.
do training evaluation.
Yeah.
They don't do training needs assessment.
Right, yeah.
What the CEO does expect is
Yeah.
that the trainer does delivery.
Hmm.
Delivery of training, in other words. And, of course, part of our problem is that people judge training the way they do education. We've all been through some level of formal schooling.
Yeah.
What do we see teachers do? We
Rote
see them
methods, yeah.
stand in front of a classroom or present online instruction, and that becomes the frame of reference that both managers and CEOs have of our field, that the one thing we should be doing is the
delivery.
most visible thing, which is delivery.
So in the case of the doctor example, the administration of the medicine should be done by the doctor, not the diagnosis. Because the second one, not do the diagnosis, not do the post-medication feedback.
Right.
Not do that, but just do the administration or the surgery.
Right.
If it was an extreme case. So that's the third thing. That's what CEOs expect from corporate training, that corporate trainers perform, do the job, provide the medicine.
And we went further. The fourth thing was we said, well, what should they deliver?
Right. The
What
content
should be
then,
the
what kind of medicine?
content
Yeah.
of delivery?
Yeah.
And we were disturbed to hear, at least from the 78 CEOs in our study, that they felt that the main role of the corporate trainer was to present the party line of the senior executive team. In other words, be the propaganda minister for the senior executive group. A very disturbing view of what the trainer's role should be.
Yeah.
To be a propagandist,
Yeah.
an apologist for...
A mouthpiece.
A mouthpiece
Yeah.
for presenting the party line, the propaganda of the senior executive group about why they do things the way they do them.
Right, right.
And not listen to complaining, not listen to alternative views.
Not
listen
cater to the needs, the real
Exactly.
needs, yeah.
So I regard that very much as the view of the trainer as simply a professional mouthpiece that does nothing more than spout what other people want them to say.
That's terrible, isn't it? No? That's
Sad.
terrible.
Yeah.
What is the Filipino perspective on that? We are a relationship, a boss-driven culture, unlike USA, which is, of course, so the gap between the boss and the employee is not so huge in the U.S., but here in the Philippines, the gaps between the leaders of the company and the frontliners is huge. What is the culture here?
I think in the Philippines, the perspective of the trainer is also the same. They just think that the trainer needs to run more programs. In fact, the measure of productivity up to this point is still the number of trainees trained, how much time was spent, how much time people spent on training.
Volume rather than quality,
Yes,
quantity rather
yes,
than quality.
yes. Many organizations are still in that mode. So
That-
they still focus on delivery rather than looking at how relevant these programs are to the needs of the organization or to the thrusts of the
How about,
organization.
Ate Maribel, about the fact that trainers can sometimes become just the propagandists for the leaders of the company? Is that also very true in the Philippines? Or is it more true in the Philippines compared to...
Well, no, I don't see it that way right now, because I see the work of the trainer in the Philippines is really looked up by many people in the organization. They see this person as the teacher. And you know, in the Asian context, in the Philippine context, teachers are looked upon highly. And so, no, I don't think that is the perception that CEOs have of the trainers here in the
So
Philippines.
but do we cater to the right needs as trainers and
Yes.
learning providers?
Yeah,
We
the
do.
issue is whether what we offer the target audience, does it really make a difference? Does it make impact with the bottom line?
So, Dr. Rothwell, fourth thing, those were three things.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the first one was evaluation, the second was feedback, the third was delivery. That's what the CEOs expect. What is the fourth thing that the
Well,
CEO
those
wants?
were really, those three things are really our main findings. Of course, we We did ask about many other things, and let me hasten to add that our study was only of 78 CEOs. So we never went out and tried to survey some larger CEO population to see if, and you have to do this to do good research, to generalize to a population. So when you do an interview study, you are simply taking a group and you are essentially finding out what they believe, and then you construct a survey, which we have not yet done, and generalize to send the survey out to a much larger population in order to judge whether the entire population agrees with what a relatively small group of interviewees have indicated. So we've not done that.
Were these CEOs limited to any geographical location, or they were?
Well, they were all in the U.S.
Right. So the perspectives were many, mostly Western.
Mostly Western.
Mostly Western.
Absolutely.
So what would you recommend now? You've been around China and most other Asian countries and across the, what would you recommend that learning providers or the learning division of any corporation do in response to this little study that has been done by you?
Well, one of the points in the book was that it was very important for the learning and development profession to dialogue with their CEO and get very clear what his or her expectations are. And we provided a tool in the book to guide that interview process in order to have a give and take discussion about what the CEO felt the learning and development function's role is versus what the learning and development staff's function believes its role is, so that there can be some meeting of the minds.
Still be impartial to the influence that leaders or CEOs might create on the training division.
Exactly.
Be objective about it. So that's one.
The stakes are high for this because, as we all know, in bad economies, we're sometimes told training is the first thing that is cut. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is that sometimes senior leaders regard learning and development as a feel-good activity, what the British call a welfare activity, which means it's geared to make people feel good.
It's a reward. Like,
and it's felt that that is something that we can eliminate when times are hard. We don't need to worry about people feeling good.
It's like a day out from work.
Exactly. That's the assumption. But in the training field, we don't believe that that is the role of our field. We believe our goal is productivity improvement. And so if, when times are hard, you cut the training function, you are actually cutting your leg off, your ability to produce better, your ability to get customers, your ability to keep customers, your ability to get people productive and make them more so when there are fewer of them. So there's a disconnect between what tradition has said the role of trainers is and what the people in the field of training who are professionally trained in the training profession, and you can get a PhD in this field, training and development.
You can?
You can indeed, from about 500 global universities around the world. And many nations regard training as critical in economic development. They tend to call it workforce development, and training falls under that. And it's all about getting your people equipped with the knowledge, skill, and attitudes they need to get and keep a job. And so very important in a nation's economic development. Very important here in the Philippines. And given the current economic conditions in the U.S., very important there as well.
Dr. Rothwell, you mentioned that the British consider this to be welfare or a fun day out from work, no? Training. Here in Philippines, we use a lot of entertainment to train. Would that be the cause for this perspective being developed by trainers across the world that, hey, it's not learning, it's fun. So when we want to cut costs, cut the fun down. Is that?
Well, there is that view. There is in the training field, we talk about the difference between hard skills training and soft skills. Hard skills are things like technical training.
Machine cutting.
Training people how to operate a machine. Training them how to run the assembly line and things like that. Hard skills. The soft skills are things like sexual harassment avoidance or interpersonal skills training, listening skills, things of that sort. Both are important, but in the second kind, the soft skills training, we sometimes try to liven up the training and make it fun for participants.
Which is good.
Yes,
which is a good
indeed
thing.
it is.
Yeah.
Some people call...
Good evening. Welcome back to Expat Insights. I'm your host, Raju Mandhyan. We are talking to Dr. Rothwell from the Penn State University and Dr. Aglipay from the Philippine Society for Training and Development. And we are talking about the value of corporate training or what the business head expects from corporate training or in-house learning. Am I saying the same thing? That's a good thing. Okay, so our challenge was that how does a learning provider have a dialogue with a CEO? So that's the challenge here in the Philippines.
Yes,
and your opinion is that we don't get a chance, or trainers don't get a chance. Dr. Rothwell, what's the solution to that?
Well, I think we have to make the chance. We have to find ways to have influence up. Sometimes as internal people, we don't get immediate access.
You mentioned the VP as a block.
The VP of Human Resources may indeed be a blocker in the sense that that person wants to limit the access of the learning and development head to the CEO, because the VP of HR is over that function.
Yeah.
And so internal people do face a challenge of trying to get access to their CEO. And sometimes the information that the CEO receives about the learning and development function is limited.
Slightly distorted.
In fact, it is distorted. And because they have no immediate way to have that dialogue. So sometimes a way to deal with that is by making that deliberate effort to make it happen. Using tools like my book's interview guide, saying, could we have this dialogue? Here's a list of questions we would like to cover. Another way to do it is by having a formal training council within the organization where we have representation from senior leaders other than the VP of Human Resources, so that there is more than one channel of communication up to the CEO. A third thing that I've studied is the amount of information that flows from training efforts back up the channel, and I'm disturbed to see that a lot of times the CEO gets very limited information about the results of the training efforts that are internally done. For example, we collect participant evaluations at the end of training courses, but who sees that?
The VP HR, or maybe not too, because he's busy doing other stuff.
Exactly.
Or she's,
So sometimes even what people said about an immediate training experience never makes its way back to the CEO, to the VP of HR, to the manager of the person who attended the training, even to the person who attended the training. So we need to find ways to open channels of communication so that there is a cycle. It is more, in the training field, we often worry about proving the return on our training investment.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that yet today.
But to me, the key issue is not so much that as making sure that there's any information that is flowing back to the CEO.
So not the 5 levels, but any level. You're concerned about the fact that is somebody reading this stuff?
Is any information getting back to the senior leaders? And if there isn't, then it's understandable that when times are hard, training would be the first thing cut.
So, Ate Maribel, what do you take from this? What can we employ from here in our country, lovely country? What can we employ given the suggestions Dr. Rothwell made?
Well, it just clearly shows that it's important to do evaluation at the end of the program, and if we can do it more deliberately, more systematically, more scientifically, so we're not accused of auditing.
Manipulating it.
Yeah, manipulating it. And then getting the information out to the right people, such as the line managers who've sent their people to training, the CEO, of course.
The other two expectations of the CEO, Dr. Rothwell, the one was that we do not do our own analysis, was the second one, and the third one was that we do just delivery. So let's go to the second one. What do we do if we don't do? What is the solution to the fact that if you're not doing the analysis, what source or what resource will do that analysis of our training besides us and besides
well,
the
their
VPs?
assumption is, and this came out in our interviews, that the line manager is the best judge. The boss is the best judge.
The one who's directly impacted from the productivity efforts of the individual.
Exactly.
Right.
But there's a problem with that thinking, but that's what they believe. And the problem with the thinking is that line managers, even if they have a Harvard MBA, have never been trained on how to do an analysis of the training requirements.
Or they don't understand the philosophy of learning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they may jump to the conclusion that training is needed when in fact some other less expensive, more practical solution would have much greater impact to address the problem. So there's where our field comes in, and we have to do a better job than we have done so far.
You're still talking about the workplace learning provider. When you say our field, it's
our field.
Previously called trainers, now called workplace learning providers, no?
Correct. So we need to do a better job of communicating exactly what value added we can bring, and that's part of the disconnect, I believe, from the findings of our study.
Doc, let me take you to two things. No? One, maybe I want to discuss this, unless Maribel, you want to bring up something else. Number one is now, what makes a good, not a great one, workplace learning provider? What are the characteristics of that person, that individual?
Well, the field recently has moved away from formal, planned instruction, training in classrooms, even online or even in blended formats. Increasingly, we're saying that about 90% of an individual's development occurs on the job from the work experience that they obtain. So part of the challenge is managing work experience to give people the capability to perform their jobs better and to learn and be groomed for future responsibility. But unfortunately...
So you're saying that the learning provider must have that specific job experience to be able to... He must be a subject matter expert?
Not at all.
No, okay.
Not at all. In fact, you can work on a team, and subject matter expertise is important, but so is instructional expertise. And those are two different animals. And so often one person does not have both. So we may have to have a team develop a training experience or even an on-the-job experience.
So make it more experiential rather than just a download of knowledge and information, no? But you mentioned the word superstar of learning providers.
Well, that's a different study I've been involved with, and we've been looking at the difference between the average trainer and the superstar trainer.
Right.
The reason we're interested... Learning provider.
Okay.
The reason we're interested in that is we know that in business and industry today, there's quite a lot of interest in the concept of high potential talent. And we know that high potentials can be as much as 20 times more productive than the average performer. Of course, when CEOs hear that, they say to HR and to their managers, give us only high potentials, which of course is not a practical answer, because there is more to it than just selection or even just training. But we've been doing some research around what does it take to be a superstar learning provider. And that's a challenging kind of research project to undertake, because how do you know what a superstar teacher is? And how would we judge one, say, in a university or in a, what is a superstar professor? What is a superstar A school teacher, how do we know one when we see one?
It's both results.
It's based on results.
Yeah.
But what are those results? Are those job results only? Or is it the lifetime of the learners that whose lives they touch? So in the work we've done so far, we've found that one of the key things that sets a superstar learning provider apart from others is a willingness to not just sit and wait for managers to come to them and ask for learning solutions,
but to create,
but to go out and find opportunities, leverage points, where they can have the greatest impact on the organization.
Get creative.
Right. Be creative in terms of providing learning solutions to organizational needs and problems. So that's one of those. Another is a willingness to be somewhat politically savvy and know
be able to get to the CEO through the VP of HR.
Exactly.
It,
or others, other powerful people to garner the support they need to get the learning solutions funded and implemented.
Enterprising.
Enterprising, yes.
Two, okay. Doc, future of training, the trends, what's happening in the future, where are we today, and give us a few thoughts about where we should go. What should we do to really land well in the future?
I think one of the obvious trends is the implications of social media, such as YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Plaxo, all of those types of efforts that link people together. How may we use that to help people learn their jobs, keep their skills current, and get prepared for the future? So we can learn from our peers, not just from our bosses or from a training department. We can learn from our peers, and not just peers in our company, but in others. And so the use of social media opens many avenues. That is a key issue right now.
Does that hamper the quality of learning, all this technology and the fact that it spreads thin over these technologies instead of a classroom interaction?
Well, it's all about how to use it effectively, and that we are just starting to get a good handle on. It is a very cutting edge and leading edge kind of perspective, how social media, we can avoid the problems with it and tap into some of the capabilities of it.
It is quite engaging at times, but it doesn't provide such a deeper impact as a classroom interaction. Yes, but we are getting there, and so we should blend it in. We should blend it in the future. Okay, Maribel, how are we doing in the Philippines in terms of technology usage?
Well, a lot of organizations are getting into that, but I think what we need to learn is how to harness the power of technology to heighten learning. And I think the line managers also have a very big role here, because the line manager must be able to facilitate the learning of their people, because as Dr. Rothwell said, it's really the line managers who spend the most time with people, and they have the greatest influence on these
It would be a good thing to teach them some learning psychology.
That's right.
Yeah, to have to transfer skills, not just coaching skills, but really create the atmosphere for the line person to learn the skills. No?
Yes.
Well, in fact, I wrote a book about that.
Yeah. Doc, there are a lot of books that you are writing. We have about 3 minutes left. Yeah. Give us the books you're writing. Give us the title of the books that are coming
current
up.
book is that I just published is Talent Management, an action-oriented step-by-step approach. Another book that was recently out in 2012 is Lean but Agile, Rethink Workforce Planning to Gain a True Competitive Advantage. And then a third thing out was something titled The Encyclopedia of Human Resource Management in 3 volumes. So those are recent books, all out in year 2012.
Wow. What would you recommend? What is that one book that you would recommend my audience today that they can pick up in national bookstores or power books here?
Well, I would hope they could find The Manager's Guide to Maximizing Employee Potential.
Okay, not what the CEO expects from
the book, The Manager's Guide to Maximizing is all about the manager's daily role in building talent.
Yeah.
And I think that is an area that we could all stand some improvement in.
All right. Maribel, we're about to close the show, and we've done a good thing here with Dr. Rothwell. Tell us what's happening with PSTD, what the plans of PSTD are.
Well, we have an upcoming conference on November 14 to 16. This is going to be the ARTDO International
That's the Asian Region
Regional
Training and Development Organization.
PSTD is hosting that this year.
Yay,
again.
okay,
Yay.
great job.
And we're also coming up with the curriculum that will support the competency framework that we have developed for the Filipinos.
Which is what in the language of the viewers?
Taking off from Dr. Rothwell's study, we also created a competency framework for the Filipinos because our experience here is a little different from practitioners in the United States. So now that we've already validated that, we're also going to come out with a curriculum that will help the learning service providers acquire this knowledge, skills, and attitudes
That'd be
that
good.
they
So
need.
we'll be a very professional organization.
Yes, and we hope to be able to also create a certification system for our practitioners.
All right, so we are done with this show. Thank you very much for these wonderful insights on corporate training or learning for CEOs, and we hope you come back soon, Dr. Rothwell.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, would you like to announce your website? Maribel, this is the time.
If you'd like to be part of the Philippine Society for Training and Development, our website is www.pstd.org.
All right. Dr. Rothwell?
And mine is www.rothwellandassociates.com. And you'll find many of my videos there.
Right, there's really good learning. You are the guru, doctor.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching Expat Insights, and I'd like to promote the company that brings in Dr. Rothwell, a company called ITD, that's International Training and Development Organization, and they are going to bring Dr. Brian Tracy in November here, and he'll also be a guest at Expat Insights. So thank you for watching. Good night and mabuhay.